You can learn everything you need to know about a machine by listening to it die. I sat in the driver's seat of the 1967 Chevelle SS, the vinyl hot against my back, listening to the engine idle. It wasn't the throaty purr I had known for 40 years. It was a wheeze, a stutter, a rhythmic, metallic shiver that traveled up the steering column and vibrated in the bones of my wrists. It sounded like an old man trying to clear his throat and failing. It sounded like me. "Dad, turn it off," Sarah said, tapping on the glass. She was standing in the driveway, holding a laundry basket, her face twisted in that mask of exaggerated patience she wore these days. "You're wasting gas." I rolled down the window. The mechanism was stiff. "The idle is rough," I said, "and there's a noise in the rear suspension. A thud." "It's in your head, Dad." Sarah sighed, shifting the basket to her hip. "Mark drove it yesterday. He said it runs perfectly. You're just obsessing again." "The stove. Last week I swore I had turned it off, but an hour later the kitchen was full of gas, and Mark was shouting about how I was going to blow us all up. I didn't remember leaving it on. I didn't remember a lot of things lately." "Mark doesn't know a carburetor from a coffee grinder," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. They were always shaking now, a fine, persistent tremor that made buttoning my shirt a 5-minute ordeal. "Mark is trying to help you, Dad," her voice sharpening. "He takes care of the house, he takes care of the bills, and he takes care of this car because you can't anymore. It's the dementia, Dad. The doctor said paranoia is part of the progression." Slipping. That was the word. Not falling. Falling implies an impact. Slipping is quiet. It's gradual. It's the slow erosion of traction until you're sliding backward into the dark. For 3 months I had felt it. The fog, the heaviness in my limbs, the nausea that rolled over me every evening after dinner. I thought it was age. I thought it was my heart finally giving out, just like the doctors warned. I was 74. I had spent 50 years inhaling Bondo dust and paint fumes. I built Van's Collision from a single-bay garage into the biggest repair shop in the county. I knew things broke. I knew parts wore out. But this felt different. "Give me the keys, Dad," Sarah said, holding out her hand. "Come inside. It's time for your tea." I looked at her hand. Smooth. Manicured. Waiting to take control. "I just want to drive it around the block," I lied. "No," she said. "You're not insured anymore. Mark canceled the policy on your license, remember?" We hadn't. I knew we hadn't, but the doubt was a worm in my gut. Had we? Did I forget that too? I handed her the keys. The metal felt cold leaving my palm. "Good boy," she said. It was the tone you use for a dog that finally drops the tennis ball. "Go inside." She walked away. I watched her go. I watched Mark come out of the garage, wiping his hands on a clean towel. He was wearing loafers without socks. He smiled at me, a wide, white expanse of teeth that never seemed genuine. "Hey, Pops," Mark said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's got a rattle," I said. "Old cars rattle," Mark shrugged, "just like old bones. Come on." That night, the nausea was worse. I lay in bed, the room spinning lazily around me, listening to the silence of the house. I thought about the Chevelle. I thought about the thud in the rear suspension. It was a specific sound, hollow, heavy. It wasn't a loose shock absorber. It wasn't a bad bushing. It sounded like something rolling. At 3 a.m., the house was quiet. I got up. My legs felt like lead. I navigated the hallway by touch, avoiding the creaky floorboard near Sarah's door. I went into the kitchen. On the hook by the fridge, where the spare keys used to hang, there was nothing. Mark had moved them. But Mark was lazy. I went to the mudroom.
I checked the pocket of his windbreaker hanging on the rack. Bingo. The keys were heavy in my hand. I didn't turn on the lights. I crept out to the driveway. The Chevelle was parked there, gleaming under the street lamp. It was a 1967 SS 396, Marina blue. I had restored it myself, bolt by bolt, 20 years ago. It was the only thing I owned that Sarah hadn't put in her name yet. I got in. I didn't start the engine. I put it in neutral and let it roll down the driveway, silently, until I was half a block away. Then I turned the key. The engine roared to life. It sounded rough, ragged. I drove. I didn't go to the park. I didn't go to the grocery store. I drove to the industrial district, to the shop. Van's collision was dark, but there was a light on in the back bay. Mateo. Mateo was 28 years old. I had hired him out of juvenile detention 10 years ago when everyone else said he was trash. I taught him how to weld. I taught him how to paint. I taught him that a man's word is worth more than his signature.
He ran the shop now, sending me the checks that Sarah immediately deposited into the joint account I couldn't access. I pulled up to the bay door and honked once. The door rolled up. Mateo stood there, holding a wrench, looking confused. When he saw the Chevelle, his face softened. I pulled in. I tried to get out, but my legs wouldn't work. The room tilted sideways. I stumbled. Mateo caught me. His grip was firm, smelling of grease and Gojo soap. "Whoa, boss," he said, easing me onto a stack of tires. "You look like hell." "I'm fine," I wheezed, wiping sweat from my forehead. "It's the car. It's running rough, and there's a noise in the back." Mateo frowned. He looked at the car. "Mark lies," I rasped. "Check the suspension, Mateo." "Sure, boss." I watched him work. It was like watching a younger version of myself. He moved with efficiency, checking the fluids, checking the plugs. "Idle is definitely off," he muttered. "Air filter is clogged. Plugs are fouled." He walked to the lift controls. The hydraulics whined as the heavy car rose into the air. I sat on the tires, fighting the urge to vomit. My head was pounding. "It's the dementia," Sarah's voice whispered in my ear. "You're broken." Mateo walked under the car. He checked the shocks. He checked the exhaust hangers. He shook his head. "Undercarriage is clean, boss." He lowered the car. "Maybe it's in the trunk," he said. "Loose jack?" "Maybe," I said. Mateo walked to the back of the car. He popped the trunk latch. I watched him. He lifted the lid. He shifted the carpet aside. He lifted the hardboard cover that hid the spare tire well. Then he froze. His back went rigid. His hands stopped moving. He stood there for a long 10 seconds, staring down into the well. The silence in the shop was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator in the break room seemed deafening. Mateo turned around. His face was drained of color. He looked sick. He looked terrified. He didn't speak. Mateo knew Mark watched the feeds. He looked at me. He mouthed the words, exaggerated and slow. "Check the trunk." My heart hammered a warning against my ribs. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked over, dragging my feet. I looked inside. I looked into the spare tire well of the car I planned to leave to my grandson, and I saw my own death staring back at me. I didn't find a broken part. I didn't find a loose jack. I found the truth. I found the reason I was losing my mind.
If you think family is always blood, if you think the people you raise will always protect you, you haven't seen what people will do for an inheritance. Hit that subscribe button, because what I screamed next wasn't fear. It was the sound of a father's heart breaking into 1,000 jagged pieces. I screamed. It was a guttural animal sound that tore my throat raw. Inside the wheel well, nestled in the hollow of the spare tire, wrapped in a yellow towel from my own bathroom, was a stash. But it wasn't drugs. It wasn't money. It was bottles. Dozens of them. Orange prescription bottles with my name on them. Digoxin, warfarin, lisinopril. My heart medication. The pills Sarah swore she watched me swallow every morning. The pills she handed me with a glass of water, smiling, watching my throat work. They weren't in my stomach. They were here.
and next to them, a plastic jug of automotive antifreeze. The seal was broken, and a turkey baster. The world stopped spinning. The fog in my brain cleared instantly, burned away by the white-hot heat of realization. They weren't caring for me. They were poisoning me. The dementia wasn't age. It was toxicity. The forgetfulness was ethylene glycol poisoning. The naps were sedation. They were slowly, methodically killing me. They were faking my doses, hoarding the life-saving medicine I needed to keep my heart beating, and dosing me with coolant to shut down my kidneys. And they were storing the evidence in the one place they thought I was too old, too blind, and too weak to ever check. I grabbed the fender of the car to keep from falling. "Oh my God," Mateo whispered. "Boss, they're killing me," I said. My voice sounded strange, detached. "Sarah, my little girl." Mateo grabbed my arm. "We gotta call the cops, right now." I barked. Mateo stopped, phone halfway to his ear. "What?" "Boss, look at this." "If we call them now," I said, my mind racing, calculating angles like I was straightening a bent frame. "Mark will spin it. He'll say I hit them there. He'll say I'm suicidal. He's been planting the seeds for months. Dad is confused. He has the power of attorney. He controls the narrative. The cops will look at a senile old man and a concerned daughter, and they'll put me in a psych ward." Mateo asked, his voice shaking. I looked at the stash. I looked at the antifreeze. "We fixed the rattle," I said. "I want to hear them," I said. "I want to hear them say it." We spent the next hour working in silence.
Mateo went to the electronics store down the street and bought a high-fidelity listening device, a small black box with a SIM card. We wired it directly into the car's battery, tucking it high under the dashboard where no one would ever look. I took the pills, the real ones, out of the bottles in the trunk. I put them in a Ziploc bag and hid them in the lining of my jacket. I filled the empty bottles with Tic Tacs so they would still rattle if shaken. I left the antifreeze. I left the turkey baster. I wrapped the towel back around the stash and closed the trunk. I need them to think they are still winning. I need them to think the old man is still dying. I drove home. The car ran smoother now that Mateo had cleaned the plugs. My hands were steady on the wheel. The fear was gone. The nausea was gone. There was only the cold, mechanical precision of a job that needed to be done. When I walked through the front door, Sarah was in the kitchen. She looked up, her face a mask of panic that quickly smoothed into anger. "Where were you?" she scolded. "The car was gone. You can't drive." She came over and patted my pockets, checking for the keys. She snatched them from my hand. "I just went to the park, honey," I lied. I made my voice tremble. I let my mouth hang open a little. I wanted to see the ducks." She relaxed. She let out a breath. She smiled, that shark smile. "It's okay, Daddy," she cooed. "You're home now. That's what matters. Mark made you some tea." She pointed to a mug on the counter. Steam rose from it. It smelled of peppermint and sweetness. "Thank you," I said. I took the tea. I shuffled to my room. "Drink it all," she called after me. I went into my room. I closed the door. I poured the tea into the potted fern by the window. The plant was already yellow and wilting. I had been watering it for weeks without realizing I was killing it. Now I knew why. I sat in my leather chair. I took 2 of the real heart pills from my jacket lining and swallowed them dry. I pulled out my phone. I opened the app connected to the bug in the car. I put in my earbuds. I waited. 10 minutes later, I heard the garage door open. I heard car doors open and close. The audio feed crackled to life. "Sarah." Sarah's voice came through, tinny but clear. She sounded breathless. "He took the car, Mark." "No." Mark's voice laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. "He's blind as a bat, babe. He probably just drove in circles." "I'm worried," Sarah said.
"He's lasting too long. Relax," Mark said. "I upped the dose in the tea tonight. The old bastard won't last another week. Once the kidneys fail, the autopsy will just show natural causes for a heart patient." "The developer called today," Mark said. "He has the dozers ready. As soon as the funeral is over, we sign the deed. We level the place." I sat in the dark, listening to my daughter and her husband plot to bulldoze my legacy and bury my body. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I started to plan. They think the Chevelle is their getaway vehicle. They don't know it's a hearse. The Texas sun is a blunt instrument. It hammers you into the ground, relentless and unforgiving, baking the truth out of everything it touches. I sat on the porch in my wheelchair, a tartan blanket draped over my legs despite the 90-degree heat. Sweat trickled down my back, soaking into my dress shirt, but I didn't move to wipe it away. The wheelchair was a prop, the blanket a costume. Beside the tablet sat a thick manila folder Mateo had handed me at dawn, a folder heavy with toxicology reports for my hair samples and forensic accounting ledgers that detailed every dollar Mark had siphoned from the shop to pay his bookie. The backyard was alive with the sound of betrayal. The annual Vance Auto Summer Barbecue was a tradition I had started 30 years ago to thank my employees and neighbors. Today, it felt like a wake. The air smelled of mesquite smoke and brisket, but underneath it was the sour tang of deception. Mark stood at the massive stainless steel grill, wearing an apron that said "Kiss the Cook" in bold red letters. He looked the part of the devoted son-in-law, flipping burgers, laughing too loudly, clutching a condensation-slicked beer bottle as he shook hands with men I had known for decades. "Hey, Dad," Mark shouted to no one in particular, grinning like a politician. "Dad really wanted everyone here." Sarah flitted between the tables like a hummingbird, accepting condolences I hadn't earned yet. "He's declining so fast," I heard her whisper to Mrs. Gable, my neighbor of 20 years. "The doctor says it could be any day now." I gripped the armrest of the wheelchair, my knuckles turned white. Last summer. "Hey, Dad," Mark said, walking over to the porch. He had a paper plate loaded with potato salad and a burnt hot dog. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at my chin, at my shoulder, anywhere but the eyes. "You doing okay? You look a little pale."
I looked up at him. I let my head loll slightly to the side. I let my mouth hang open just a fraction. "Just tired, son," I rasped, my voice thin and reedy. "Is the car out front?" "Yeah, Pops," Mark smirked, taking a bite of his own burger. "Polished it up just for you. Everyone is admiring it. They know it's going to be mine soon. I told them I'm thinking of putting some new rims on it." New rims on a '67 SS. The sacrilege almost made me break character. "Good," I whispered. "I want to make a speech. One last speech." Mark hesitated. He chewed slowly, his eyes narrowing. He didn't want me talking. He wanted me fading. "I don't know, Dad," he said. "You might get confused. You might start rambling about the war again." "Please," I said. "Just a few words." He shrugged. "Sure. Old-timer. Whatever makes you happy. Just keep it short." He set the plate down on the railing, out of my reach, and grabbed the handles of my wheelchair. He wheeled me down the ramp, bumping over the threshold with careless speed. We rolled onto the patio. The chatter died down as people noticed me. Mark tapped a spoon against his beer bottle. Clink, clink, clink. "Everyone," Mark shouted, raising his arms. "Dad wants to say a few words." The crowd hushed. I scanned the faces. I saw my mechanics, guys with grease permanently etched into their palms, looking at me with worry. I saw Mrs. Gable dabbing her eyes. And I saw Mateo. He was standing by the back gate, leaning against the fence. He wore his work boots and a clean shirt. His arms were crossed over his chest, his face grim. Standing next to him was Sheriff Miller. Miller was in uniform, his hat pulled low against the sun. He wasn't eating. He was watching Mark. Mark handed me the microphone. He stayed close, his hand resting on the back of my chair, a silent threat. He was ready to snatch the mic away if I went off script. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was weak, shaky, amplified by the speakers Mark had set up to play yacht rock. The crowd murmured respectfully. "We love you, Elias," someone shouted. "I built this life on two things," I continued, letting my voice gain a little strength, just a fraction. "Honesty." Mark chuckled nervously beside me. "Okay, Dad. That's great. Let's not." "A car is like a family," I said, cutting him off. My voice was stronger now. Less rasp, more steel. "It looks good on the outside. Shiny paint.
chrome bumpers.
You polish it up and park it in the driveway for the neighbors to see. But if you have rot in the chassis, if you have bad fuel in the lines, it doesn't matter how good it looks. Mark's hand tightened on my chair. I have a gift for my son-in-law, I said, my voice booming now, clear and resonant. Mark, go open the trunk of the Chevelle. It's parked right there in the driveway. Mark froze. His smile faltered. Dad, we don't need to do this now. I roared. The weakness vanished. The tremor stopped. I threw the blanket off my legs. It pooled on the patio stones. I stood up. I didn't wobble. I didn't sway. I stood at my full height, 6'2" of anger and iron. The crowd gasped. Sarah, standing near the punch bowl, dropped a tray of deviled eggs. The plastic platter clattered loudly on the concrete. Shh, she whispered. You. Do it, Mark, I commanded, pointing a steady finger at the blue car gleaming in the sun. Open the trunk. Mark looked at me. He looked at the speakers. He looked at the crowd. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet dough. He realized the trap had snapped shut, but he didn't know how deep the teeth had sunk. He walked to the car. His legs were stiff. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He popped the latch. He expected to see the stash. He expected to see the bottles of heart pills he had stolen, the jug of antifreeze he had used to poison my tea. He expected to have to slam it shut and make an excuse. He lifted the lid. The trunk was empty, clean, vacuumed. Not a bottle in sight. Mark, whispered, his voice cracking. He spun around, panic rising in his eyes. Mateo cleaned it out this morning, I said into the microphone. I pointed to the gate. Mateo stepped forward. He held up a large, clear plastic evidence bag. Inside, plain as day, were dozens of orange prescription bottles, and next to them, the jug of automotive antifreeze and the turkey baster. And if you'll listen to the speakers, I said. I looked down at the tablet in my hand. I pressed the button. My voice cut out. The speakers crackled. Then a new voice filled the backyard. High fidelity, crystal clear. The old bastard won't last another week. Once the kidneys fail. It was Mark's voice, arrogant, cruel. Then Sarah's voice joined him. And the shop. As soon as the funeral is over, we sign the deed. We level the place. The recording ended. The silence in the yard was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, pressing down on everyone like a physical weight. The birds seemed to stop singing. The wind died. The guests stared at Mark and Sarah with a mixture of horror and revulsion. Mrs. Gable put her hand over her mouth. My old foreman, Big Mike, cracked his knuckles, looking like he wanted to tear Mark apart with his bare hands. Sarah backed away, shaking her head. No! You poisoned me, I said. My voice didn't need the microphone anymore. It boomed across the yard. You gaslit me. You told me I was crazy. You told me I was forgetting things. Sheriff Miller was moving now. He walked onto the patio. He wasn't smiling. He reached for his belt. Mark and Sarah Vance, the sheriff said, his voice flat and professional. Sarah screamed. It's a misunderstanding. He's crazy. Look at him. He's senile. I have the toxicology report, Sarah, I said calmly, holding up the folder. I have the hair sample analysis, high levels of ethylene glycol. I have the wire transfers from the shop accounts to Mark's bookie. Mark tried to run. He took one step toward the gate. Big Mike stepped in his path. Mike is 6'5" and built like a brick wall. He just crossed his arms. Mark stopped. He slumped. He started to cry. Mark, sobbed, pointing at Sarah. She told me to do it, Sarah shrieked, lunging at him. You gambler! The deputies pulled them apart. I watched as they cuffed them. I watched as my daughter, the girl I had walked down the aisle, the girl I had bounced on my knee, was dragged through the crowd of people she had tried so hard to impress. They were shoved into the back of a squad car. The lights flashed, red and blue reflecting against the polished chrome bumper of my Chevelle. The car drove away. The party ended. The guests left quietly. They shook my hand. They apologized. They didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, Elias, Mrs. Gable whispered. Neither did I said. An hour later, I was left alone in the driveway with Mateo. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Are you okay? Mateo asked. He was leaning against the fender of the Chevelle, wiping a smudge off the paint with his sleeve. I will be, I said. I walked over to the car. I ran my hand along the quarter panel. It felt cool and solid, metal and glass, honest things.
things that didn't lie to you. You promised me the shop, Mateo said quietly. I did, I said. And it's yours. No, I said. I have a lot of work to do.
I have to rebuild the engine of my life, Mateo. I opened the driver's door. I sat in the seat. It fit me perfectly. I turned the key. The engine roars to life, a deep, throaty rumble that shakes the ground. It doesn't stutter. It doesn't shiver. It purrs. The idle is smooth as glass. I put it in gear. I looked at the empty driveway where my daughter's car used to sit. The grief was there, a heavy stone in my gut that I knew I would carry for the rest of my life. But the fear was gone. I drove out of the gate, the exhaust rumbling a victory song, heading toward a horizon that was finally clear. अब तुम्हारा पास मेरा कंपेटिटर का सारा डेटा आ गया है. अब तुम ना मुझे मेरा चैनल के लिए थंबनेल फॉन्ट बना कर दो. ऐसा ज़्यादा ना हो और ऐसा हो कि व्यूअर क्लिक करे. क्लिक बेट मेरा जितना भी ऑडियंस का डेटा दिया है उस हिसाब से मुझे फॉन्ट दो. और रेड लाइन में मुझे 1 शॉर्ट लाइन 3 to 6 वर्ड्स मैक्स अब मुझे डिटेल में बना कर दो. थंबनेल्स का फॉन्ट जैसा मैंने कहा है वैसा ही इस स्क्रिप्ट का थंबनेल फॉन्ट मुझे बना कर दो. डिटेल में मुझे साथ ही जैसा मैंने कहा वैसा ही मुझे 50 वर्ड्स का ऑब्जेक्ट वर्ड्स भी दो.